Welcome back. You're watching Business Insight. I told you that we want to discuss the future and, of course, the past of the green gold, if you like it, tea. I'm joined by Karin Boomsma. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Boomsma.
Yes,
yeah.
You got it
Boomsma.
right.
And she's our director with Sustainable Inclusive Business joining us here. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Edward Mudibo is the Managing Director, East Africa Tea Traders Association, also in studio with us. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us. Karin, I want first of all to hear from you. When you look at the tea industry here in Kenya, is it sustainable?
There's always things to improve. But it's one of the biggest industries, so they always have been looked at with a critical eye. And I think because it's also an export good, again, you have to comply to lots of rules and regulations to be able to export. So I think it's we can call it fairly sustainable, but there's always things to look at, because if you want to be relevant tomorrow and in 5 years' time, what can you now improve in your business practice to be even more sustainable?
Very well. I mean, you're from Netherlands, and we know for sure that Netherlands is well famed for milk industry and cheese. What lessons would you say we would learn from the industry, from the milk industry in your country, from the dairy industry in your country? From the
dairy industry in the country. I think what you can learn is that it's actually not so easy to guarantee qualities by smallholder farmers. So I think actually in the tea industry it's actually really well done. What we see in the Netherlands is that you have huge corporations, so that we can really control and manage the quality, which is great for people, but it's also great to make sure that we do not use chemicals which go back into the soil, etc., etc. And yeah, dairy is a different story, because it's animal agriculture, which has a much bigger footprint even than the agriculture. I would like to actually also make one statement. I think it's really good to call agriculture agribusiness. Because then we can look at it from a business perspective. It needs to make business sense. Then you can look at it not as only a culture, but you really look at it from a business sense point of view.
Thank you very much. I'll be coming back to you, Karin. I want to hear from you, Mudibo. I mean, you have seen those slides, and the official slides and the figures that you have seen there. I mean, what conclusions do you make?
One is that we've seen a rise in the volumes, significant rise in the volumes of tea over the years. And in fact, when we look at the volumes for 2017, it's gone up to 439,000 tons, quite an increase. We've seen also the number of counties growing up from 18 counties, which were traditionally growing tea, to 21. Again, there's a significant increase. And then in terms of the earnings, the foreign tea is a leading foreign exchange earner. And again, to that end, the 2017 we recorded 129 billion shillings. So there has been a significant increase in terms of both quantity and the foreign exchange earnings from tea. In terms of prices, indeed, there has been slight decreases in terms of the average price. But that notwithstanding, we expect that as it stands now in 2018, it's about $2.50.
$2.50
as of now.
So we're talking about 255 shillings.
Yes.
You know, Kenya shillings.
So if we base it on 2019, 2017, where it stood at about $2.98, still it's a decline.
It's very good that you have brought about the issue of price. 2017, I mean, $293. We're talking about almost 300 shillings, you know, per kilo. And one question that the farmers have never understood is why would tea fetch so much on the international market, and then they end up getting about 58 shillings per kilo? How would you explain that?
A lot goes into, there are a lot of dynamics in terms of the tea business. One is that we have got, when the moment the tea is exported, it has to get into various markets. And the determinant is the packers, would be the packers, the various packers we have in different parts of the world. Again, the average prices will vary from country, the different consuming countries, for example. So what is disposed of at the auction varies again depending on the different markets that we have.
But you see, the prices we are talking about here are average prices, which means that some countries would buy the tea, at a much higher price. Others would buy it at a lower price, and that's why we get the average of, for example, at $2.93, last year. So, what component costs a lot, in the whole value chain? Is it in transport? Is it in brokerage fees? Or where do we get it wrong?
We've had a tea value chain study done recently, and when we look at the factors, the farmers still get quite a substantial part of what comes out of it.
A substantial is
substantial, we are looking at about 74%.
74%?
74%. The
How
brokerage,
do you arrive at that?
This is when we look at the overall average costs across the value chain. The energy costs are also quite high. Brokerage is barely 1%, even though the notion is that brokers
they make a
kill. It's barely 1%. It's about 0.98%, which is not even 1%. Then we've got the transportation costs, warehousing charges. All that builds up into terms of the costs. So the farmers generally, it varies depending also on the factories. There are also energy costs, which are substantial, which take up quite a sizable part of the costs, which are within the value chain. But then that notwithstanding, we are looking at that in terms of the Kenyan context. When it goes out for exports, it's the various market chains which will determine at what they sell. Yours is to supply to them. At what they sell, you cannot control that. So it doesn't always translate that when the farmers are getting it at $2.50 or 60, that it is dependent. I mean, what happens out there must translate to them. There are also packaging costs. There are also the aspects of goodwill and various other components which go into what finally goes into the what is actually provided for at the shelf.
I mean, I'll be coming back, still on that issue. But Karin, I want to find out from you, when you scan the tea value chain in this country, from the soil all the way up to the supermarket shelves, should farmers be getting what they get at this point?
I think, I don't know all the details, but I think what Edward is saying is correct, that they actually get a fair share at the moment. But you also have to look at what goes into it. So if you talk about energy, so that's what we also look at. How can you make it more cost efficient? How can you make it more sustainable? We look at aspects of energy, for instance, and I think the Kenyan Tea Development Agency also, we are now looking at renewable energy at tea farms, which is a great improvement because it's cutting costs, but at the same time it's much better for the planet as well to not use other resources of energy. So the renewable energy, so you have to be innovative. So I think you cannot expect that you marginalize every cost you have in order to squeeze out the most. You have to look at what you need to put into it to at least guarantee a farmer a steady and sustainable income over the years. And that comes with innovation, and it comes with improvement of soil, and it comes with more effective labor approaches. So you look at all those elements and you optimize that so that the planet and the people are happy, but also your profits are stable.
But we don't have a study case, that concludes that, and we have, factories that have, adopted, sustainable ways, of drying tea, and some of them, have gone solar, others have gone wind. But I want to find out from you, I mean, how much does, for example, energy cost take out of tea?
It's about 30%.
30%,
which is quite substantial.
That's substantial.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that they still use firewood.
Yes.
Wow.
30%, of which about 18% would be the electricity costs. So we're talking about power.
Yeah.
Yes, that's quite a cost, and possibly this is where we expect maybe the Kenya Power to consider also reducing its costs in terms of power. Of course, on the other end, we have those who have been innovative. Kenya Tea Development Agency has also been good at that. They've also come up with small hydros where it's practicable to have, and that has also reduced the costs. Small hydros where it's possible because of the gradient through the subsidiary Kenya Power, the KTDA Power subsidiary.
It's a subsidiary. And let's talk about labor. And we know for sure that, you know, this industry has been plagued by serious labor issues, you know, from one unrest to the other. And we have seen, you know, industrial courts, you know, granting placards, you know, a substantial increase in terms of their remuneration. But still, you know, Kenyan placards, you know, they're still rated as some of the lowest earners, you know, in the industry. So if placards were to give given more increment in terms of for their labor, how much would this affect the industry?
As it stands, I would really not accept the notion that they are that poorly paid when you consider the factors.
Well, that's a report from the Food and Agriculture Organization, unless you would want to counter the argument.
We look at other aspects. What do they get as a benefit? What do they, in terms of housing, in terms of medical, and various. When we put it in sum total, then there is a good benefit. One thing we must realize is that the matters of sustainability are there. You better have something, what you consider little today, but have it through and through, other than having so much of it and having a factory or an establishment closed down, which would be the better. So these are some of the realities we have to face. Would you rather have the labor or have machinery replace you, if that would be the case? So you're better off having what is acceptable and a decent carry home than not having it at all.
And the issue of mechanization, you know, of tea industry has been a thorny issue in this country. Karin, I mean, do we need to embrace this technology for once and for all?
I think you shouldn't cut out human labor because I think
But it's costly.
It's costly, but everyone needs to eat by the end of the day. So if you look at a circular model, a circular economy model, you're actually not cutting out labor because we have a
But the future is mechanization.
Not everything. I think the future is technology, but it's not all mechanism mechanical. But what I would like to add is, I think the issue is fair pay, because not everything, you know. The issue is that you look at it from a cultural perspective, like agriculture. I think we have to really not use that terminology anymore. It's agribusiness. So you look at it, because if you have only half an acre, who is working on that half an acre? Then your end of the year might be little amount. It might be a good percentage, like you get the same percentage as anyone else, but in absolute amount of money, it's little. Who is working in that half an acre? That's not a full-time, that's not your full earnings probably. So you ask your cousin to do it tomorrow, your aunt is doing it today, so that is not a business model. So I think if you can combine forces, you can also combine labor. Now labor rights are a right, so that's a different story. But you can maybe collectively have also benefits as employers, as workers. But if you have, you know, you have to really bring the smallholders to farmers together.
Tell me this, why do we still have a very high prevalence, poverty prevalence rate in tea growing zones, which is estimated to be about 50% of tea farmers live below the poverty line?
First of all, we need also to look at what populace are we looking at here. We have more than 700,000 tea farmers. Which other sector or subsector of the economy supports such a huge number of people? We have got about 6 million Kenyans who directly or indirectly depend on tea. So that in itself also gives you a demonstration. But then it's not just about tea. Those farmers are not so over-dependent on tea. They are now being sensitized also to look at other avenues to diversify, possibly have a cow there, have a different commodity here. So it's not just about tea per se. And the notion is that they're lowly paid. We need to look at others. Tea generally is doing quite well when we compare with other commodities. Like right now, where is coffee, cotton, sugarcane? You name the commodities, pyrethrum. Most of these commodities are in the ICU.
I mean, you cannot compare. You can't compare. You have talked about.
Yeah.
But as Karin said, there's always room for improvement. I mean, you cannot compare yourself with failures and say, I'm doing fine. You are likely to get stuck in some sort of a glut. But I want to find out from you, when you look at tea, the way tea business is handled in this country, are you convinced that it is handled the best way?
I'm convinced that in relative terms, we are doing it in a very superb way. I would look at the model of KTDA. KTDA is a model worldwide. It's only sometimes we don't appreciate the good work they're doing. With 7 subsidiaries, it has proven that whatever is available is for the good of the farmer. We've got the power agency outfit to support reduction of costs. We have got the microfinance outfit to support the farmers, meet their day-to-day needs. We've got the warehousing done by Chai Trading. We've got Ketepa doing the packaging. And I would go on and on. We have each of the 7 subsidiaries have proven that they have worth for the farmer. Because in the absence of that, we would have had middlemen and others coming in to fill up that void at a high cost to the farmer. So our model is sound, and it has proven that it works over time. But look at the tea auction. It is the largest tea auction in the world.
For the time being.
And for some time to come. We don't see any other coming up so that soon, and it's soon getting automated. We expect by March of next year, we should have the auction platform running. We have 10 countries which literally supply their teas to the Mombasa tea auction. It's the only multi-origin auction in the world, selling teas in dollars, and farmers are paid, or rather the suppliers of the tea are paid in 9 days, record time, 9 working days. So there's much to pride ourselves, and that's why through the systems and processes that we have in tea, it distinguishes tea from any other commodity that we have.
Definitely. I mean, what you are quoting there is, holds some relevance in it, because the small-scale tea farming in Kenya is a model case, started by so many countries in the world. But it has also come under scrutiny, and there's a bill in Parliament right now to revert Kenya Tea Development Agency into an authority. And when you look at the report that was done by FAO, they also raised concerns about the monopolistic tendencies of KTDA, in the sense that it acts as the regulator, it acts as the marketer, the seller, and everything else. And then they were proposing that there should be some separation of roles. Would you agree with that?
I would say that that is not really correct. KTD has never been a regulator. The regulator is actually the Kenya Tea Directorate, the Tea Board. And for purposes of, again, the notion about monopoly, it's not more about monopoly, it's more about systems and processes to help that farmer from exploitation. And that's why I cited the different subsidiaries which KTD has. And they've proven, nobody has questioned that their systems. But sometimes those who make a lot of hype about those different entities, it's because they have their own interests. When prices go up, nobody complains. But let the prices slightly dip, then everyone you care
they'll go
we will go be appearing at the auction to find out what went wrong. Really, and we know we're dealing with dynamics of supply and demand. No commodity will always have prices going up. There will have to be fluctuations depending on supply and demand.
Karin, I want to hear from you because, I mean, we're almost winding up. What is the way forward? How should we ensure that, you know, we grow the industry, we grow the farmers, and we all thrive and we go home happy?
Yeah, I think it's what you mentioned before. I think it should be a combination of things. So you can't leave the human component out. But I think what you prove with the auction here and also with the Kenyan Tea Development Agency is that if you really are able to link all the components in an ecosystem, you have everything under one wing. You can look at it and you see where you can still improve, and it becomes transparent. And if you have transparency, then people can become happy, because then you don't have blame games which are not correct. So you have the transparency, we can just admit where we can improve. Is it on human aspects? Is it on the environment? How can we regulate that? So I think that transparency and technology to have the auction, that's amazing. I mean, that is really great.
Yeah.
And it actually enables everyone to work together in the best possible way. So I think that makes people in the end all happy.
And when you look at it again, who takes care of you right from farm up to cup? If that's what monopoly is all about, then it's misplaced. You are taken care of in terms of extension services to appreciate, up to being provided with seedlings, fertilizer. Then you deliver, the teas are delivered, the trucks will pick your teas to a factory.
It's marketed for you.
It's marketed for you.
You just find money in your account.
Computations are done, you get your money in your account. All that is a system.
What else would you ask for?
It's a working system.
But despite all that, tell me this, Mudibo, when you scan the whole value chain, I mean, what is this one thing that you feel as tea traders that should happen that will change the entire industry for the best?
As of now, my take is that let's relook at the policies and regulations. As we discuss now, we don't have an agricultural policy. We've been trying to get a tea policy out, national tea policy, since 2014. It's not yet out. We don't have up-to-date tea regulations. The ones we had were based on the 2012 legislation, which is now no more. We have a Crops Act, but without supporting regulations. So first of all, those regulations need to be looked at and reviewed as soon as possible. In terms of taxes and levies, those again the government has to relook at, because we are looking at about 37 taxes and levies across the value chain, from farm to cup. So again, that has to be relooked at. What can government do in terms of? Then we have in the agricultural produces. Then others are still emerging in terms of the different the players, port health charges. So all these build up in terms of eating into what would have been a carry home for the farmer. So there is a bigger picture to look at in all this.
And of course, it calls for all the players, you know, from farmers to policymakers, policy implementers, and of course marketers, you know, to sit down and see how and what best can be done to change the fortunes of the industry. Karin, do you want to say something before I lock you out?
Thank you. No, I agree with Edward, but also I think it's really worthwhile to look into renewable energy in the sector. So I think that would be better for everyone. But
how comes, you know, Dutch are not good takers of tea?
We aren't? No, we are big coffee drinkers.
You take a lot of coffee?
We take ridiculous amounts of coffee, yes. But we also like our tea. I think we can't beat the English, so we just stick to coffee.
Can we agree that you are going to be an ambassador of tea in Netherlands at the moment.
Of course,
you go back there.
I bring it when I go home, when I go to my friends. It's one of the things
Kenyan
I
tea,
bring.
by the way.
Of course.
Very well. I like the of course.
Yes.
Edward, thank you so very much for joining us here. Karin, thank you so very much here. Very much. Encourage your people to take more tea.
Yes.
Kenyan tea, definitely.
Sustainably grown.
Very well.
Yes,
and thank you so very much. You've been watching this interview coming to you live from Broadcasting House, where we have been discussing tea issues. And of course, you have heard it from the experts themselves.